TV, it's Jim Varney.
Another crash today at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Another Delta jetliner down. But this time, in the midst of death, this is also the story of survivors. This time, most of those aboard the wrecked plane made it.
We felt the flames and somebody kicked the door open. I jumped onto the wing and I was off. It was unbelievable, unbelievable.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rattle reporting. Good evening. At least 13 people died today. 34 were hospitalized after the Delta jetliner burst into flames as it crashed on takeoff in good weather. But more than 90 people, some cradling infants, crawled from the wreckage as fire and rescue crews moved in. There is no immediate word on the cause of the year's first crash of a major airliner in this country. Bob McNamara is in Dallas.
From the moment we left the ground, you knew that we were going to wreck.
The Delta 727 jet crashed into an open field just seconds after takeoff from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport.
Then all of a sudden, you just hear just see it hit the ground and just a big white blast of smoke like a football field long, just like a shake of smoke just went across, and all of a sudden a big black cloud just come up out of the middle of it.
But miraculously, among the flaming wreckage of Flight 1141, most of the more than 100 aboard lived to tell about it.
We never got going. You could hear the thing, you could hear this noise, so you knew something was real wrong. And the plane's doing this, so yeah, you know something's real wrong.
And it went from side to side, and then all of a sudden people started screaming, and you know, you just did what you could. You know, there was kids everywhere.
When we finally hit, I opened the exit door, and I couldn't get out of my exit because it was all on fire. So we shut the door, and everybody got out on the other exit.
Originating in Jackson, Mississippi, with a stop in Dallas, Flight 1141 was bound for Salt Lake City. And there, Noni Selgage waited for word of her husband's fate.
Dennis, oh, I've been waiting so long to hear from you. No, are you okay? You're okay. Just cuts and abrasions? Are you... Oh, I'm so glad.
Crash survivors told of escaping the burning wreckage through a gaping gash behind the plane's cockpit section, while others fled through exits over a burning wing. Many of the injured did suffer burns about the hands pulling themselves from the jet. The injured were taken to more than half a dozen nearby hospitals, while the bodies of the dead were removed to a temporary morgue. Investigators still have no cause of the crash, no conclusions as to why the jet went down on a sunny, slightly hazy morning. But the luckiest day of Michelle Christensen's life was one for her family, too. She was headed for her parents' silver wedding anniversary tonight aboard another Delta flight. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Dallas.
What went wrong with today's Delta flight in Dallas? It may be a while before investigators determine that, but already there are eyewitness accounts that will help, and there are reports tonight that moments before the crash, the captain radioed the tower, and I quote, "There's smoke in the cabin." Correspondent Peter Van Sant reports what's known, what's suspected, and what may be done about it.
Seconds after Delta Flight 1141 tried to take off from DFW Airport, passenger Norman Newcity sensed something was dangerously wrong. Seconds after Delta Flight 1141 tried to take off from DFW Airport, passenger Norman Newcity sensed something was dangerously wrong.
We're about 20, 30 feet off the ground, and there was like 3 big backfires.
Newcity's description of what he heard matches the reports of eyewitnesses who say they saw the flames, one called it an explosion, coming from one of the 727's engines. The jet then crash landed and burned. Experts are saying investigators should check the engines first.
Try to make a determination what the engines were doing, if they were functioning normally. Engines could ingest things, debris, dirt, birds.
The Delta 727 was powered by Pratt & Whitney JT8D engines, which have a recent history of breakdowns in flight. Investigators will also be checking the plane's brakes and wings to see if a flight control problem may have contributed to the accident.
Something like a dragging brake slowing him down on takeoff roll, flap problems or leading edge slap problems which affect the lift of the airplanes.
Once on the ground, Flight 1141 turned into a fiery battle for survival.
From the moment that we landed, the plane was just filled with smoke. I mean, absolutely filled with smoke, and I was afraid that we were all going to die because of the smoke problem.
One safety expert says this accident points out the need for better fire protection on jetliners, that some of the dead likely survived the aborted takeoff only to die in the fire and toxic smoke.
Fully loaded airplane with thousands of pounds of jet fuel is a rolling bomb, effectively, and if you split it open, you're going to have flammability. The question is, how do you make that more survivable than it is today?
We should have now fuel tanks that are totally fly off the plane when a crash occurs, and we ought to have fuel lines that cap off when a fire occurs.
Tonight, investigators with the National Transportation Safety Board are questioning the Delta flight crew, hoping to find clues as to why Flight 1141 turned into a disaster. Peter Van Sant, CBS News, Dallas.
Today's crash brings back echoes of an even greater tragedy involving Delta Airlines at the same airport. And Delta has had a string of other disturbing things happen in recent years, including passenger planes landing at wrong airports. Despite this, correspondent Bruce Hall reports Delta's reputation is as good as any and better than most.
It was just over 3 years ago another Delta jet crashed at the same Dallas-Fort Worth airport, killing 137 people. Delta pilots were blamed for that crash, which took place during severe turbulence. The airline has paid out millions in settlements, and officials are still haunted by that accident.
It does bring up the memories of 3 years past. And just the coincidence of it happening in Dallas, this accident, those things do make you recall the past.
Aviation experts see no connection with the earlier crash and today's accident, except for the name of the airline. Delta has long had a reputation as one of the best airlines in the country, but in recent years, Delta has been plagued by mishaps. Last year, a Delta plane nearly collided with another jetliner over the Atlantic. The Delta flight apparently drifted off course when the pilots entered wrong information into the computer. In other incidents, a Delta plane landed on the wrong runway in Boston, the wrong airport in Kentucky, and a premature shutdown of the engines almost caused a crash in Los Angeles.
We think those passengers who know Delta Airlines are not worried that Delta is doing something wrong. We want to get to the bottom of this accident here. And then if there is anything Delta can do, it will do it.
Industry analysts agree, saying Delta fixes its problems.
Given the assumption that there's nothing inherent about Delta that caused this accident, that this ought to be something that they can get by, that this is an unfortunate incident, and they will be able to go on and provide the service that people are used to.
Despite the public confidence and support, it has been a very difficult 3 years for Delta. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Atlanta.
The government deregulated the airline industry 10 years ago. A federal study earlier this year concluded that deregulation has meant greater safety in the sky. In the wake of this latest tragedy, David Dow reopened that question.
There's no doubt that deregulation has contributed to the crowding of America's skies. Air traffic has increased a third in the nearly 10 years since commercial airlines began setting their own rates and routes. The number of scheduled airlines has nearly doubled. But has that created a safety problem? Many say no.
Every study that's looked at the issue has not found any correlation between the economic deregulation that Congress passed 10 years ago and the safety record as reflected in airplane crashes.
The FAA says the accident rate involving all aircraft, private and commercial, has fallen nearly 35% since deregulation. Fatalities have dropped by nearly a quarter. But some experts say the figures may not reveal the full picture, that in some cases the margin of safety may have been cut in the airline's competitive pressures to cut costs.
They haven't done it by trying to be illegal or unsafe, but they've done it by trying to cut what appeared to be fat, but what inadvertently, especially at the hands of managers who are not aviation experts, happened to be the heart and soul of what we call the safety buffer.
It was just such concerns that prompted a special inspection last spring of all Eastern and Continental jets. Inspectors concluded that an unsafe condition did not exist. Others worry that the increased demand for pilots could eventually cause problems.
Deregulation has had an effect on pilot experience levels. Both the large airlines and the commuters are hiring people with lower skill levels.
Federal officials like to point out they did not deregulate safety. But some worry that the number of safety regulators has not kept pace with growing air traffic.
We barely now have enough safety inspectors to do the job, and many of them, according to a GAO study, can't even pass the basic tests required for the job.
Meanwhile, the FAA director today reiterated his confidence in deregulation.
I can say without any reservation that deregulation has no impact, no negative impact on safety.
At the same time, federal officials reaffirmed their previous plans to add additional inspectors. David Dow, CBS News, Los Angeles.
7 people were killed at the airport in Hong Kong today when a Chinese airliner skidded off the runway and broke up in the harbor. 89 people were aboard the flight from Canton, which was landing in a heavy rain. Most of the people escaped by scrambling through an emergency door and onto the wing. 15 people were injured, including 2 Americans. The 7 dead included 6 crew members who were trapped in the front part of that aircraft. Neighbors and government leaders crowded into a small church in Italy today to mourn the 3 Italian pilots killed in Sunday's air show disaster. The 3 died when their jets collided in midair at a U.S. military base in West Germany. At least 45 more people died on the ground when one of the planes crashed into a crowd of spectators. 166 people are still hospitalized with injuries, many of them in critical condition. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, Solidarity's Lech Wałęsa meets with the Polish government and both sides bend. Correspondent Bert Quint is in Warsaw. And Deborah Potter reports on new regulations to keep your checks and you from getting held up by the bank.
If you used to take capsules, the makers of Tylenol have just come up with something better. New extra-strength Tylenol gel caps. They're gelatin-coated, and compared to capsules, gel caps are 33% smaller, with all that extra-strength pain relief concentrated into a solid center under a smooth gelatin coating. So gel caps are actually easier to swallow. If you used to take capsules, try new extra-strength Tylenol gel caps. It's not a capsule, it's better.
It took 2,000 years, but a revolutionary discovery is changing the way men think about coloring their gray hair. It's called Just for Men, from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men, and in 5 minutes, shampoo out. Your gray is blended away, leaving your natural-looking color. 5 minutes. Here, look at me. Just for Men leaves your hair looking healthy and fuller, and it won't fade or wash out. Just for Men, in the men's hair care section.
When you buy Corning prescription lenses that change, it's like getting free light tints, free medium tints, dark tints, and a range of free sunglasses all in one. Corning lenses that change, the only eyeglasses you'll ever need.
If you're like me, you want your engine to perform. That's why you and I both need Quaker State with QSX. No other oil runs cleaner or fights sludge better. And it's the same Quaker State you buy right off the shelf.
The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
On the 8th anniversary of a deal that first legalized the Solidarity trade union, the Soviet-installed communist leaders of Poland and Solidarity chief Lech Wałęsa cut a new deal today. Bert Quint reports.
Lech Wałęsa promised the regime today he will urge strikers throughout Poland to go back to work. In return, authorities made a major concession. They agreed to discuss the future of Wałęsa's outlawed union, Solidarity. Tonight in Gdansk, an aide read a communique from the Solidarity leader.
Established so that we break now the current striking actions.
The decision was taken while Wałęsa met with one of the generals who had put him in prison in 1981, Interior Minister Czesław Kiszczak. They talked for 3 hours in an isolated villa in Warsaw. Wałęsa seemed satisfied with his return to the center of public life. Even though his union still is a long way from the legality strikers demand, the dialogue with the regime he sought for years now seems within reach. That's as much of a first step as he hoped for when he called the strike in Gdansk. It comes on the 8th anniversary of the agreement that brought the East Bloc its first independent union. Apparently, as a gesture of goodwill, the government sent an impressive delegation to mark the occasion outside the shipyard where Solidarity was born. Strikers inside responded with the cry, "There can be no freedom without Solidarity." Late today, Wałęsa left Warsaw to return to Gdansk and rejoin his followers. This time not to call for defiance of the regime, but to ask all of Poland's strikers to end the country's worst labor crisis in 7 years. Bert Quint, CBS News, Warsaw.
A huge bomb explosion wrecked the offices of several anti-apartheid groups in South Africa today. 21 people were injured by the early morning blast. The main tenant of the building was the South African Council of Churches. Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu blamed the attack on, quote, perpetrators or supporters of apartheid. Strong language today on future arms control negotiations from the Reagan administration. President Reagan's spokesman said that unless the Soviet Union agrees to dismantle a controversial missile tracking radar under construction in Siberia, the United States won't conclude any more arms reduction pacts. The U.S. says that radar violates the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty.
No one knows I just got dentures, and I don't want anything to blow it.
Fix-It and forget it.
Denture is candied everything, but with Fix-It, I can get a taste of the local flavor.
Fix-It and forget it. Fix-It helps fix loose spots for a strong hold that lasts longer than any leading cream.
I just got dentures, but it hasn't slowed me down.
Size a bit of 45, want to hear 45, 45, fierce.
Use Fix-It and forget it.
Tickets for Webb.
We interrupt this purchase for a reminder.
Here we go.
There's another decision worth entertaining.
Very smart.
Choosing the card that actually pays you cash. Cash back for every charge. The Discover card.
I'm starved.
It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
The truth is, heart specialists concerned about aspirin irritation recommend Ecotrin over Bayer to help prevent second heart attack. Consult your doctor about the only brand of aspirin that's safety coated to protect your stomach. That's Ecotrin, and that's the truth.
Now, a revolution in blade shaving from Remington, the new Remington Electro Blade, with vibrating blades for a close, smooth, comfortable shave. Safe, immersible, and cordless. The new Remington Electro Blade vibrating blade system.
George Bush tried to divorce himself today from 8 years of Reagan-Bush administration policy on the environment. Bob Schieffer covered Bush today in Michigan.
Bush had to work hard, at least 30 throws if you were counting, before he finally toppled a smart-aleck clown at the Michigan State Fair. But he may have to work harder yet to accomplish his main mission. In effect, Bush came to the shores of Lake Erie to say his administration will push for tougher clean air laws than the current administration ever did.
I'm an environmentalist. Always have been from my earliest days growing up and then as a congressman.
Bush called for a global conference on the environment, an end to ocean dumping, much tougher emission standards, and in a clear break with Ronald Reagan, called for immediate action to reduce acid rain.
The waiting period for action on acid rain is over, and I, as president, will be ready to move.
Thousands of miles away, Bush's running mate picked up the new battle cry.
No one loves the coastline more than George Bush. He would never do anything to harm the environment.
Democrats marveled at what they called an election year conversion.
The administration, you know, has done absolutely nothing with regard to the environment until the questions of election and the possible environmental issues arose.
The record of the Reagan-Bush administration on water pollution, indeed in every area of environmental policy, has been an unmitigated disaster.
In Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis said Republicans always shortchange the environment.
But the grant program is gone. He wants to spend it on Star Wars. He doesn't want to spend it on clean water or ending pollution or improving the quality of life.
At the fair, however, Bush said he's really serious about the environment. The Democrats say if that's so, he'll have to run against his own administration. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Detroit.
Jesse Jackson and the mayor of New York City finally got together today, 4 months after their heated exchange of insults during the state primary. They were selling the impression that bygones are bygones for the sake of party unity. Betsy Aaron reports there were few buyers.
It was political theater of the highest or the lowest order. The much-touted meeting between New York's Mayor Ed Koch and Jesse Jackson, arranged by New York Governor Mario Cuomo.
They came. It was very difficult for them. I said inside that I believe, candidly, it was probably more difficult for Reverend Jackson than it was for the mayor.
It was a marriage of convenience between Koch and Jackson in order to carry New York, a key state, for Dukakis.
He is the person who can change things if he becomes the president. If he loses because Jesse Jackson and Ed Koch somehow or other faltered, then it will be on our heads.
All this against a background of racial tension in this city. Tensions raised during the April New York primary when Mayor Koch said this.
Any Jew, supporter of Israel, who supported Jesse Jackson would have to be crazy.
That said, Jackson supporters point out that he carried New York City in the primary without Koch, and they urged him to cancel this so-called summit.
Mr. Koch is and has been a clear and present danger to people in this country and in this city who wish to work together toward a better America.
But today, after the meeting,
the April campaign of '88 is behind me. November 8th of '88 and next year's campaigns are before me.
Jackson has been campaigning and registering voters, but is he campaigning for a Dukakis win or a Koch loss in the mayor's race next year, or both?
What you're asking now is a $64,000 question. How are the new voters going to vote? And my feeling is the new voters, you don't know.
Is Jesse Jackson asking Ed Koch to write his own political obituary by registering hundreds of thousands of blacks and Latino voters? Stay tuned. Betsy Aaron, CBS News, New York.
The Census Bureau today reported that family income of Americans rose 1% last year. The report also noted the number of people living in poverty swelled slightly to 32.5 million. Most disturbing, said a spokesman, was the increase in poverty among blacks, up from 31% in 1986 to 33% last year. The government put the poverty level in 1987 at $11,611 for a family of four. In Miami federal court, the Cortis Corporation pleaded guilty today to concealing defects in thousands of heart pacemakers. Those pacemakers were sold between 1980 and 1985. They are no longer on the market. 4 former Cortis company executives were indicted for alleged criminal cover-up. Another bad inning for Major League Baseball owners today. An arbitrator ruled that owners did conspire against signing free agents after the 1986 season. Another arbitrator found similar collusion involving free agents after the 1985 season. Today's decision centers on 8 players, and damage hearings will be scheduled.
Introducing A1 poultry sauce with herbs and spices. Turn your drumstick delicious, your broiler to bliss. Relish it. Embellish it. Savor it. Flavor it. Because A1 poultry sauce makes the most of chicken any way you make it.
Shh. Listen to your mouth. That's the crunchy texture of a Triscuit. And that's the delicious whole wheat taste of a Triscuit. They're made to take on any topping or no topping. Listen to your mouth. Triscuit.
These days, Americans are eating foods that are low in cholesterol. Or are they? Cooked in butter, even these aren't as cholesterol-free as they could be. That's why there's Butter Flavor Pam Cooking Spray. It has a buttery flavor, yet adds no cholesterol. So you can pick foods that are low in cholesterol and keep them that way. Pam, because how you cook is as important as what you cook.
When you go shopping, you have to find the right fit, style, color.
When you do, you feel great.
But when you also find the Made in the USA label, you feel even better.
It's a great feeling.
Made in the USA.
Excuse me.
No problem. We know about kaopectate too.
Kaopectate actually absorbs the germs that can cause diarrhea.
Kaopectate bags. The diarrhea specialist.
In Washington today, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board announced a $1.9 billion bailout plan. It consolidates 14 of Oklahoma's more troubled savings and loans into 6 holding companies. Loan board representatives will meet with Oklahoma officials tomorrow to try to arrange the sales. Federal spokesman insisted they can bail out the nation's ailing S&Ls, many of them in oil-producing states, without turning to taxpayers for help. Beginning tomorrow, there'll be a new and reassuring meaning to that old phrase, "you can bank on it." That's because of something Congress passed, the Expedited Funds Availability Act. Deborah Potter explains what that means for you and why it may make your life easier.
Do you want to ask him? Well,
Judy Mark thought a money order would be as good as cash, but her bank thought otherwise and left her stranded with just $20 in her pocket.
I said, this can't be. I've got all this, things to buy. I've got no clothes. I've got nothing appropriate here. You've got to help me. And they said there's nothing they could do. They said that is the rule of their bank, a 10-day hold.
For years, consumers have been complaining that it takes so long for deposits to show up in their accounts, they wind up bouncing checks.
I have gone to the bank so many times and said, where's my money? And they said, oh, you can't have it yet.
Well, it certainly doesn't take a bank 2 weeks to process anything. So, in essence, what they're really doing is they're gaining some interest with my money.
According to government figures, banks have made millions of dollars a year by holding checks for more than 2 weeks. $145 million from charges for bounce checks, another $290 million from investments made with customers' money. But a new law that takes effect at midnight tonight will change all that.
As a result of this decisive action by Congress, consumers will no longer have to fear being held up at the bank.
Under the new law, government checks and money orders can be held for only 1 business day, local checks for 3 days, and out-of-state checks for a maximum of 7 business days. Predictably, the banks say that's not long enough to protect them against bounce checks and fraud.
It is a while before we know whether or not that money can be drawn out of someone's account, whether or not that money is actually in their account.
Bankers already are asking Congress to change the new law to cap their liability. And they warn that because it will cost them more to process checks as quickly as the law requires, that cost will be passed on, you guessed it, to consumers. Deborah Potter, CBS News, Washington.
And that's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Rich stain and tough polyurethane protection in one. Polyshade by Minwax. Get a beautiful finish in half the time. A finish to be proud of. Polyshades by Minwax.
In a new survey, we asked 1,000 doctors if stranded in the middle of nowhere, would they want Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, Advil, or Bayer? Doctors chose Bayer, 3-to-1 over extra strength Tylenol. Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
The Van Pattens meet one tough customer.
Dick Van Patten, you're saying someone can oil and lube my car better than me?
Yes, it's called Jiffy Lube. In 10 minutes, the J-Team changes the oil with quality Pennzoil.
Here comes the Pennzoil.
Replaces the filter and lubes the chassis. Fills the fluids, 14 services in all.
Okay, but how much?
So
welcome to Jiffy Lube.
We'll take care of you like family.
J-Team, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Honey, should we take the other car?
I'd rather not. Ford Escort now offers an attractive new design, plus fuel injection and a 660 powertrain warranty. In fact, the redesigned Ford Escort may make your other car seem considerably less attractive.
Honey, aren't we ever going to take the other car?
Nope. The world's best-selling car just keeps looking better all the time.
Now get a $500 cash bonus on 88.5 Ford Escorts.
Smith. Tomorrow on CBS This Morning, survivors from the Delta crash, and Dr. Bob Arnott from the Hospital Trauma Unit. Tomorrow on CBS This Morning.